Hey guys, welcome to Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. So we're doing a video today talking about Jesus being our treasure and children being given to us by God. So this may be a video you want to watch, it may be a video you're not interested in, but that's what we're talking about today. If you hear noise in the other room, the kids are watching a show because it looks like it's about to rain here in Maine. Even though there's nothing on the forecast, it looks like it's about to rain. So I brought them in instead of them all running in the middle of this.
Right. It's been dark and cloudy all day. We've been outside doing a bunch of projects with Grandma, and everybody's been outside quite a bit, doing a lot of things in the house, out of the house, lots of work.
I just had them shuck a bunch of corn, not a bunch, but like, I don't know, 12 ears of corn or something, whatever was bought. My mom got it the other day because we're having that for dinner, and it's easier to do outside, but I didn't want to do it in the rain if it rains. Yeah. So anyway, we went to church yesterday. Today's Monday. We went to church yesterday. Yeah. And our pastor is speaking through Luke. And so yesterday he was talking about the rich man. I can't remember what the text was. He started reading and I had to take the rich fool. Thank you. I was like,
had the
now
big
I
harvest
can't
tear
remember.
down the barns. Oh, sorry.
So I took someone to the bathroom. He started doing the Bible reading. Someone needed to go to the bathroom. I took him to the bathroom. Forgot what he said. Right. So yes, the rich. And then it was about the do not be anxious because God takes care of the birds of the air. The lilies of the valley are clothed. What do you have to worry about?
I think it was Luke 12:13 through 34 was the text. Yep.
So,
similar to Matthew 6.
So first he was talking about the rich fool who has planted planted a garden, a field, whatever you want to say. And when it comes harvest time, there's going to be more than he has availability to store. So he starts thinking, how am I going to store all this stuff? Instead of thinking,
you should get a pressure canner.
Instead of thinking, why has God given me a more abundant harvest than I was expecting? What does God want me to do with this? He thought in human terms, okay, it's mine. What am I going to do with my stuff? And how am I going to store my stuff so I have more stuff?
I do have to wonder, though. We just finished Genesis this morning as a family. And so it's kind of in the back of everybody's head, well, there was this 7 years of plenty to store up for the 7 years of famine. And in Joseph's case, that was a great idea that God told him in advance. So maybe it's a good idea, but that's not how Jesus handles it in Luke 12.
No. And there is a idea of preparing for coming days. And so that's what we've been talking about in Genesis also as a family, is just where is that smart point of where is that line of stocking up and where's that line of hoarding?
Right.
I know we all just got through the pandemic a couple of years ago, and there were times where you were almost out of toilet paper and toilet paper was not to be found. People are going to watch this video 30 years from now and be like, what are they talking about?
I don't think anybody's going to watch this video in 30 years. I don't know if they're going to watch it this week. But
no, I'm just saying.
But they're not going to watch it in 30 years wondering about our toilet paper stockpile.
But during that, there were times that you were like, oh no, is there going to be toilet paper at the store next week? Because we're getting low. But there were other people who had stockpiles of toilet paper and are still using the toilet paper they bought 4 years ago.
Yeah, they filled their garage with toilet paper, evidently. They thought they'd need it for that long. I think you probably ought to worry, I remember during the pandemic, somebody bringing us flour. It was we had no flour. We couldn't find flour to buy. And one day, one person brought us 50 pounds, somebody brought us 25 pounds, and somebody else brought us 5 pounds. So we ended up with 80 pounds of flour in one day from places we didn't know.
I think all the stores around us stocked on the same day, and everyone knew we were looking for it, so it got brought to us.
Yeah, that was sweet.
But anyway, there's the idea of stockpiling, and then there's the idea of hoarding. And so I think when God has given you a specific instruction, like he did to Joseph, of there's 7 years and this is your job, you stockpile.
I'm not thinking we're going to be 7 years without any food growing in this country anytime soon. I mean, God can do anything that he wants, but it's not common. Not in the modern era.
We don't need to normally keep 7 years worth of food in our house.
Right. We have a garden that supplements our food, but it isn't all we have. I mean, we could probably do better on that. That's a great thing to do too, is provide for yourself. But the idea, talking about tearing down your barns to build bigger barns because of this one-time thing, and how much are we trusting God in the day-to-day, and how much are we trusting in our own provision, and
So part of what the message was about yesterday was, are we focused on the right things? Are we focused on, in the story of the rich fool, He has planted, and he has not done anything to get the harvest.
Yeah. God makes it grow. You plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God provides the rain. God provides the sun. God provides the natural disaster that kills it, or the good weather that allows it to keep growing. God does all of that. And so to think that we are somehow in charge of our own thinking, our own profit, our own gain, we have to realize that all comes from God. And we were actually reading a book last night. We mentioned on another video, but Joseph and the Coat of Many.
The Gospel
of Many Colors. He had a coat of many colors, but it's
The
Gospel
book
of
by
Many.
Bodhi Bacham, yes.
But Vodi was talking about when we think that we have our own choices in things. And this just kind of went back to that thing.
It was speaking about the sovereignty of God and the providence of God, where the sovereignty of God is God's absolute power, rule, and authority over everything in the universe. He created it, he made it, it's his. He sustains it, it's his. Providence speaks of how God accomplishes his will amongst his creation, what he orchestrates, historical events, things like, I'm going to give this 17-year-old kid whose brothers hate him a dream, and his, then they're going to sell him into Egypt, and then he's going to end up in Potiphar's house, and eventually in prison, then Pharaoh's house, and interprets the dream. And God, it's not Joseph having a great dream and Joseph being really smart, but God working through all of those circumstances, even with an evil, a sun-worshipping Pharaoh in power in Egypt, and how God saved his people. Because Abraham, Isaac, Jacob's whole family shows up in Egypt because God has provided for Joseph. In spite of the evil of his brothers, in spite of all the other things going on, God protected his people, the nation, what's going to eventually be the nation of Israel, by his providence, that the means by which God accomplishes his will, I guess.
Yeah. But what he was saying in the book that was interesting to me is he was talking about we don't have choice. Like, we do have choice, but all those things are given to us by God. And so in the example he was doing, he was saying, if you were offered vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry ice cream, which one would you pick? Well, you have to remember that your taste buds were given to you by God. And so some of that, like what you taste, was given to you by God. And that means you might like chocolate better, might like vanilla better, whatever.
Or the memory that you have of going to your grandma's house and always having strawberry ice cream with your grandma. Well, God's the one that made your grandma. God's the one that made strawberries. God's the one that gave us the wisdom to be able to make all these things together to make ice cream. And to have that as part of your life and your heritage and your memory, like the things we talk about with your dad, memories from the past, those are also orchestrated by God. Yeah. So God is in charge of these things, and he brings us in and draws us near to himself and allows us to be part of how he works things out in redemptive history. Yeah.
Yes. So then our message went on to talk about not being anxious and that God provides things and, you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear. Right. And as the speaker was talking, he was talking about like needlessly worrying. Yeah. So saying, I'm not going to worry about what I'm going to eat tomorrow. God has provided that we have grocery stores, and he has provided you funds to go to the grocery store and get the food.
Yeah, he's not saying stay home, don't work, don't do anything,
just
don't
wait
cook.
for it to be
God
showed
will
up at the door.
miracle your food. That's not what he's saying either, because God has also given us commands. Yeah. Which are the means by which his
But there were times in the Bible, like multiple times in the Bible, where people were fed by miraculous means that they didn't do anything to. The ravens, the manna.
Yeah. For 38 years every day.
When Elisha went to the widow's house and she was making her last loaf of bread, or said she was making her last loaf of bread, and God made all of that sustain for a long time. So like there were multiple places in when Jesus makes wine. Yeah. And when he feeds everybody, the loaves and the fish. Like there were times that people were miraculously given food and they didn't have it.
But that's not the normal way.
Yeah. That's not the normal way. But there are, like, God will provide, I guess is what I'm saying. And we've been in situations where we have used our last piece of meat in the freezer, and twice we've had our freezer filled after using the last piece of meat.
With corn dogs. Random strangers show up at your camper.
2 different places.
When you're 1,000 miles from home, because we're working with a church there, and these random people who don't know us and have never met us One lady shows up. I just saw y'all's vehicle here, and I just figured maybe you needed a bunch of food. So she brought us a bunch of food, which included corn dogs.
And sausage gravy.
And sausage gravy, which we had never eaten corn dogs before.
So,
I was thinking about the example of the text. Sorry, I'm looking out the window because out the window, I'm kind of watching the weather, but out the window are a bunch of birds and a bunch of flowers. And yes, Grandma planted the rhododendron, but I didn't do anything to bring these birds in. The birds are there. God takes care of them. He feeds them. And that was the example in the text. Think about these birds. They don't plant gardens. They don't have storehouses. God provides for them. And in the same way, God loves us much more than he cares about the sparrows. And the flowers that are the rhododendron just outside that window are withering and about ready to fall off.
but they were beautiful just a few days ago.
They were gorgeous. And, the tree was planted, but like you said, it's God that provides the rain. It's God provides the growth. Even you can miracle grow it to death all you want and do all the gardening you want. But if God doesn't want it to grow, it's not going to grow. Much in the same way, a married couple can get together and say, we want to have babies. We plan to have babies. We're doing all the things that are necessary to have babies. And God sometimes gives you babies and sometimes chooses not to. And again, in the Bible, it says God restrained, closed the womb of all the women in a certain region because of this one person's problem. Or in other cases, God closed the womb of one person so that when they were really old, Abraham, Sarah, when she was really old, way beyond childbearing age, God blesses them with this miracle child.
Yeah.
So God was in charge of that as well. Mm-hmm. So we can trust him in everything. Like when God makes you promises, you can trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thoughts that were going through my mind the other day is that God provides us with the children that he gives us. He also has, he's given us the blessing of children, which is a great blessing to have. Mm-hmm. But when he gave us those children, they're not ours to keep and do what we choose to with them. They are ours to steward for God, to bring glory to God. Mm-hmm. And so our job as parents is to be raising our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, mm-hmm. and to be pointing them always to him, mm-hmm. and making sure that we are using our lives to point others to God, even through having a bunch of children. So mm-hmm. I know that we've had times in our lives. Where are you going? We've had times in our lives where we've been able to talk to people about God and blessings God has given us through trials with our children, or just the fact that we have children. Like the fact that I was in the hospital to have a baby, nothing wrong, just that's where we mm-hmm. choose to go. Right. I was at the hospital, we're having a baby, and I had a ton of time to talk to my nursing staff about mm-hmm. God. But we've also had times where Josiah's in the ICU, right. on a tube that's doing all the breathing for him, mm-hmm. and I'm able to talk about God mm-hmm. and his goodness and his plan mm-hmm. in the midst of that mm-hmm. too. And some people are very nervous to leave their fertility open to God, mm-hmm. and to just say, God, whatever you choose to do in this. Mm-hmm. And
we've been there.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard our story, quick, we got married.
Allergies.
We got married. Mark had a child from a first marriage that came into the marriage with mm-hmm. us. Mark was having neurological issues when we got married. Mm-hmm. We decided that we weren't ready to start a family because of Mark's neurological issues, and we went on birth control. Mm-hmm. And God gave us Virginia, which was a real blessing. And she is now 21 and expecting her own baby. Mm-hmm. But at the time, we didn't know that we could handle a child. Mm-hmm. And then
but God provided the baby and provided the ability to take care of the baby with the baby.
Yeah.
God provides that for which he gives you stewardship of. He doesn't say, hey, I want you to be totally responsible for this task, but I'm going to make you completely incapable of doing it also. Right. Like if you look in the church, how is the church supposed to run? Read 1 Corinthians 11 through 14. That's what it's supposed to look like. Like God tells us about spiritual gifts. He tells us order in the church. He doesn't just say, go do church and figure it out your own way. Like he tells us how to do it. He even tells us, like Matthew 18, someone sins. If a brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, because the purpose is reconciliation.
Well, and back to the church, he gives each of the people in the church spiritual gifts, yep. and he's put the right people in the right church at the right time. Mm-hmm. So he's not going to leave a church lacking. We might think we're lacking because
We know churches that are without a pastor. Like they normally have a salaried staff pastor who does much of the preaching and counseling, that kind of thing, and they haven't had one for a couple of years now. But talk to anybody at the church, they would like to, like, they're pursuing that, but God is providing for his people. God is providing. Some other men are stepping up that hadn't stepped up before because, hey, if somebody else is doing the job, I don't need to do it. Sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's, I mean, it can be any even different. I don't want to get into a long scenario with that. Sorry. I get distracted easily. Does anybody else get distracted easily? Oh, look, a squirrel.
So after Virginia, we went back on birth control and waited 3 years and then decided we were ready for another baby. And we got pregnant and had a miscarriage just a few weeks later. And at that point, we realized, okay, God, we said we weren't ready for a baby, and you gave us one, which was a great blessing. And then when we said, okay, we're ready, you gave us one, but took that baby away, and you're in charge of this. Like the scenarios that led through all of that showed us that he was in charge. And so since then, we've left it all up to God. And in that, we've lost a couple babies, some to miscarriage, one to stillbirth. But God was faithful through all of those.
Yeah, because he also gave us the strength to deal with the grief. And in the dealing with the grief, able to help other people going through similar circumstances of grief. So we've been able to counsel and encourage and help people who have lost a baby to miscarriage or stillbirth. And not that you have to have the exact same experience as other people in order to minister grace to them. That's not necessarily the case, but it does give us kind of some credibility. Like, I can actually say I've been there in that hospital room, and I've held my dead child in my arms and wept and prayed and sang, and I know how hard this is, and be able to minister to people. So even those really hard things that happened to us, like in the story of Joseph said, you meant it for evil, and it was evil. He was thrown in a pit, sold into slavery, all these bad things that happened to him, but God put him there for a purpose. And so why has God put us in our circumstance, whether it's a bunch of children or wanting children and having none, or anywhere in between, like any circumstance we're in, do we trust that God will bring us to a difficult thing and bring us through it, and in the end grow us and make us more like Christ in the process and draw us closer to himself? And that's what we've seen in every hard trial, but also in every blessing. Yeah. To have gratitude, to be grateful to God, because everything we have, including our lives, our ability to think and reason, and all of these things exist because God graciously gives them to us.
Yeah, I think that God has only given us the strength to get through each situation when we've needed the strength to get through the situation. And it's not that God's going to only give you as much as you can handle. That's not what the Bible says. And the verse that's talking about that is talking about giving you a way to escape temptation. Right. So a lot of people misuse that verse, but God is going to give you more than you can handle. And then he's going to be there with you to get through it, because you need to learn to rely on him more when you're going through those things that you're now at the end and you say, I can't do this anymore, God. And God says, yes, you can, because I'm going to walk alongside you.
And Jesus said that he would give us the Holy Spirit, who would comfort us, who would lead us, who would guide us into all truth. And that has been our experience. We have seen that every single step of the way, that whether it's great good or great difficulty, or just we're not really sure where to go, we have been guided by the Holy Spirit, and God has provided for our essential needs. Now, it's not saying we're going to have a brand new house and a brand new car and everything on earth or absolute health. We don't believe that. In fact, I believe, if anything, we have drawn closer to God and understand him more thoroughly and been ministered to by the Holy Spirit more deeply because of the hard things. Through the trials. It's like in a marriage. If everything's really good and you're on vacation, everybody's making plenty of money and the kids are all healthy and everything's great. Not that isn't good too, because it is. But oftentimes it's through those hard things. Like I think I appreciate my role as a father immensely more since her father died. When your dad died, it was like, I now have to be the man to kind of lead and to help and to to be the spiritually strong one, and I'm not in and of myself. That's what God has done. That's what the Lord does in us. But oftentimes it is through those hardest trials that I feel the most blessed, the closest to Him and closest to you and to the kids, because we appreciate what we have. I don't know. It's kind of like growing up poor and appreciating things like ice cream once in a while. Like, I don't remember having that much. Anyhow, sorry, I'm blathering again.
So in the message, it was talking about that next section about do not be anxious about anything.
Yes.
And I think that one reason that people are afraid of leaving their fertility up to God is because they don't know what that's going to mean for their future. We, as a society, and probably even people not from America, but I just know it's very real in America.
We know the culture here, yeah.
That we are very, we like our life of ease and contentment.
We're spoiled.
We don't want to.
We're first world problem kind of people. You know?
We don't want to get out of that. And if you think of the challenges that come with having children, it's easy to fret of the, will we have enough money? Will we be able to afford enough food? Will we be able to take care of all of them? Will we have to deal with health issues? Like the more kids you have, the more chance there is that you have a health issue type thing. Will I be able to, I don't know, as a mom, will I be able to let other people step up and help when I'm needing, first trimester, being sick, that type of thing? Am I willing to not have things exactly the way I would do them because somebody else is doing the cooking and cleaning? Am I willing to give up control, I guess? It's about control. Are we willing to let God actually be the one in control? And when we take birth control, we're not actually in any more control because God can override birth control. That's how we have Virginia.
Well, just the phrase birth control. Now it's like, I'm in control of this. I'm making positive decisions about my body and my choice and my future. You're not in charge of your future. God's in charge of your future. Not that we're irresponsible. That's not what I'm saying. This isn't fatalism. This isn't like, you can take anything to an extreme, I guess. Yeah. But I think you're right. I think it's very easy for me to say, man, there's so much, it's like everything, there's so much in my head right now. I was a truck driver. I was somebody that drove us in a camper and vehicles all over the country. I had delivery jobs. I was a truck driver. That's what I did. And I haven't driven a car in 7 years. Like, God gave me a health condition that makes it so that I can't drive a car.
And Mark does not like the lack of control.
Oh, I'm still kind of a backseat, side seat driver. Kind of. Not as bad as I used to be. I think probably when I first stopped driving, I would probably yell at people on a very regular basis about what they were doing wrong and how stupid they were and things like that. And over the time, Virginia has taken driver's ed and learned to drive and has driven a bus hauling a trailer in Atlanta, on a Sunday afternoon and 6 lanes of traffic kind of thing. Naomi's now has her driver's license. But it's also things like, I can't drive the lawn tractor anymore. Like, I'm not safe to be operating machinery because of my condition. So Samuel has taken over riding, the riding lawnmower and that kind of thing. It's like, that was kind of my thing. And that was actually your dad's thing too. Your dad really liked having his lawn look good and worked hard at it. Even though he had a hard time getting around because of his medical condition, he still did it. And so I always felt like, even the last few years, like, this is something I can still do. I know Naomi knows how to do it. And now Samuel, it's just like, but I have to let go. And not just because I need to not be in control of it, but also to say, Samuel is 14 years old. He's 6 feet tall. He's 140 pounds, whatever it is. He's capable of doing that job, and he wants to do that job, and he can invest. And sometimes God takes us out of the way of something so that someone else will have the opportunity to serve in that way. This is convicting even when I say it. Like, in my own head, the things I'm saying are like, wow, you got to be more consistent about that, bud. I'm going to let you talk for a while because now I'm feeling bad.
So anyway, I think that we very much don't want to give up control to God. Mm-hmm. And leaving our fertility up to God might mean that we have no children. Mm-hmm. It might mean that we have a lot of children. It might mean that we have a few children really close together and we're worried we're going to have a whole bunch of children and then God stops us from having more children. God is in control of it. And I think that we as people, it's very easy to be like, okay, so right now I'm 41. I can maybe have babies till I'm 50. So if I have a baby every 2 years, that means we can have
45,
4
47.
more kids before I'm 50. You know what I mean?
We can plan it all out.
But God might say, no, Elisha's your last baby, and that's okay. And I think that people who don't leave their fertility up to God think that people who do leave their fertility up to God just have this like special faith or something like that. We've heard that in other things like, oh, you just have a greater measure of faith than I have or something like that. But it actually takes a whole lot to just leave it up to God, because if you're somebody who's like, okay, we want to have 3 children, and you feel like because you're on birth control, you're the one making that decision, you're not relying. It's still God who's doing it. So I'm not trying to take God out of the picture, but you think that you're the one planning your kids when you want them.
Yes, I orchestrated my
sense?
life, and it's turning out just the way I planned.
Right. But when you leave your fertility totally up to God, there are times where you might have a miscarriage. There are times where you're going to feel in over your head. Like, okay, God, I just got that pregnancy test and I don't know that I'm ready for another one. And being willing to say in front of the pregnancy or non-pregnancy, God, I trust you even in this. Instead of trying to take control over it. But there's also very unique circumstances that I don't want to negate people who have serious medical conditions and have to make decisions about this. And there are parts of the Bible, there are certain types of birth control I never see as a biblical standard.
Right.
Like there,
I don't want to. Birth control is killing a baby.
Right. So I don't want to get into which birth controls or not. But what I do want to say is I do know that there are people out there who have had to make very difficult decisions. And there are times in the Bible where it talks about like a couple not coming together for a time of prayer and fasting. And I think that would totally make sense in the case of we have a major medical condition we're dealing with right now. And like, I can't go into each circumstance, and I don't want to.
Additional information is welcome. Feel free to say whatever you'd like to say in the comments, as long as it's nice and pleasant.
Be kind to each other.
Be kind to one another and to us, because we don't know it all. We're speaking from our experience and the experiences that have been shared with us by other people.
Right.
So we don't know it all. But yeah, we can see where there are
very hard decisions.
Things that are harder, the decisions we've never had to make, so we don't feel that we can say them. But there's also things like, well, we don't just kill our children because we feel like that would be easier. Like some people, abortion is murder. Abortion is killing a baby. It is a baby that is alive, that God has made in his image, and they are in his likeness, and they have life. And whether they breathed outside the womb or not, I don't really care. They are a human living being, and if you kill them, it is murder.
Right, from the time of fertilization.
So that being said, I understand there may be circumstances in which you say, I don't really think it's wise for us to conceive. Once you've already conceived, the decision is over.
Right.
You've made your decision.
Right.
Because you've now made a living human being, and there's never a case in which you should kill them.
Right.
And we're not going to argue here about ectopic pregnancies and all those kinds of things. Those are
medical conditions.
We can talk about those things, yes. But, sorry.
That's okay.
I think it's one way in which we see much in our society, because that's what we're all about, is trying to share what's going on in the world, knowing other people have burdens, have hard decisions to make, to encourage people to trust God, to trust God, to say, well, I wasn't planning on getting pregnant, or like we know people who were raped, and their choice was that everybody told them, kill your baby, kill your baby, kill your baby. And they didn't, and they had their baby, and they loved their baby, and their baby isn't a reminder to them every day about the sin that happened to them. They would tell you that. There may be cases that's the case, and that's not what I'm saying. But I remember some of my sins because my sins had long-term consequences. Like, I have a criminal record because of sin in my life. 25, almost 30 years, actually 30 years ago in April. So it's been decades, literally. But I still have a criminal record. Like, that still haunts me. But I can't change the past. But I can say, but going forward, I'm not going to be that person. And I can marvel in the forgiveness of God and the mercy of God even more because I've experienced very, very bad things. There have been very traumatic things that have happened to me in my life that I'm not going to explain right now. But just because that was bad doesn't mean that defines me. What defines me is I am in Christ. He has made me his own. I am saved. I am going to heaven. And he is with me every step of the way today. Whether I'm sick, whether I'm healthy, whether I'm rich, whether I'm poor, whatever circumstance I'm in, I've learned to trust God in the midst of those kind of circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And every baby is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will say, well, is it a boy or a girl? Well, as long as it's healthy. Well,
What if
they're not healthy? Like Josiah
not healthy?
Josiah has cerebral palsy and epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
And none of that was ever exposed on any, ultrasound or anything that we had. But we would not have made any different decision than keeping a baby because he was a baby, because he's a living human being, and we're not going to do anything different because he might be sick.
And we've heard stories from people that we know personally that have had babies that in the womb they discover some horrific abnormality, and people say, just kill the baby and whatever. So that's not the answer. And some of them have seen miraculous healing, and some of them have seen the doctors actually didn't know what they were talking about. They were wrong.
And
Because
sometimes
doctors
you don't
make
know which,
errors, and the tests aren't always 100% conclusive.
and sometimes you don't know which it is, because Samuel was born after our stillbirth. He was the next baby.
And we were told we may never have any more children
Right.
at that point.
And so we went for one of his ultrasounds, and his head measurements were off to the point that they were saying that whatever it was he had, I don't even remember at this point because this was 14 years ago, but whatever it was he had would need surgery right away, and that we might need to deliver at the bigger hospital, which is about 2 hours from us, because of it. And by the time we went in for the next ultrasound, his head measurements were right. So was that person who did the ultrasound wrong, or did God miraculously heal Samuel? I don't know. But
Doesn't matter. The point was killing a baby wouldn't have answered it.
Right. So I'm saying that it wouldn't have mattered even if Samuel had whatever that was that they were talking about. But
because he's our child and we'll
he's our
love
child,
him.
right.
And we're going to take care of him as much as we can, and we'll recruit people to help us like we have to do with Josiah. We have to recruit doctors and neurologists and people that take MRIs and EEGs and all of these kind of things. We do have a team that helps us, but we're not going to give up on our kids because things are hard.
Right.
I would hope God doesn't give up on us because we're hard. Like, we disobey, we wander away, we were continually like sheep wandering away, and he's returned us to the shepherd and guardian of our souls. That's God. He is the shepherd and guardian of our souls. He's not letting things pass by him. Something comes into our lives, it's because he has brought it, whether that's health or death or whatever.
And also, I think that a lot of people are nervous to have another baby because they're worried that they're not going to have enough of themselves to go around, enough to love all the children. Like, how can you love 10 kids? We've had people say that because this is baby number 10 for those who are watching for the first time. And the love is shared. It's not that I have less love for my first child because I now had number 10. It's that we have more people to love. And so kind of like in church, like if your view of going to church is our church is just the right size, so we want to make sure no one else gets saved because we don't want to add someone to this group.
No more people.
Instead of saying that'd be great if more people got saved because there'd be more of us to be able to go on and like advance this kingdom.
To encourage one another, to serve one another, to all of those things.
And so we are like our job is to advance our family in the way of advancing God's kingdom. Like moving forward as a family, like as a family unit to advance God's kingdom. And so when we bring more people into the family, there's more people to teach about God and show God's love to, and work together to then do more evangelizing and gospel work and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so we want just the idea that God will give us the love to go with each of the kids, because the idea is that you're growing the family, meaning there's more to love, more to share, more to, in a good way, not in a, it's now been split up.
Right.
Kind of like the ideas of the loaves and fish. Like, no matter how many people were there, Jesus was going to be able to feed them all.
Yeah. If there was only 100 people present, 5 loaves and 2 fishing, I can go real far. So, but there was 5,000 men, plus women and children. There might have been 20,000 people there.
But if there were
But it wouldn't matter if
10,000
it
men,
was 10
plus whatever.
people or 1 billion people. When God says, Jesus said, they came to me to listen to me, and I'm going to feed them. And he did it with 5,000 men and 4,000 men, plus women and children. But he also, like you said, went to a wedding feast and made wine. Like, that's not a necessity of life. It's not you absolutely have to do it. It's not like these people are going to starve if we don't feed them wine. But he did, you know.
Yeah. So, leaving, like, I don't want to make this all about have as many children as you can, because that's not what I'm saying at all. I wanted to say trust God in everything, which includes having children.
Yep.
And God will provide for you. It may not be exactly what you're looking for. It may not be in the way. Like, when we started having kids, we had no idea that God was going to provide for us by letting us live in the house my parents built the year we got married.
Right.
Like, that was never, I expected my parents to grow old in this house, and
That's why they
maybe
built it.
one of us kids would inherit the house after they died. But then 10 years ago, my dad passed away, and mom didn't want the big house. And so we now have a great relationship with my mom, living on the same property as her, but we get to live in the big house.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't have any idea that God was going to provide that way. Over the years of us having children, we've lived out of state multiple times and haven't been super close. Like, always been close with my parents and like talking on the phone, but haven't been like physically close.
Right. We lived in Florida. We lived
with
in
my
Georgia.
parents.
We lived in Kentucky.
So
We've lived,
we've lived lots of places.
We've traveled a lot, but like we've actually lived in Florida, in
Right.
Kentucky and Georgia.
So God had a plan in providing for our family before we even knew that this was going to be the plan.
And through something at the time that your dad died, one, it wasn't even a thought of ours, but two, like, this is a catastrophic trauma to our family. And even
it brought about a lot of
God worked incredibly through that to grow us in our faith, to grow us in relationships. Like with your mom, we spend a lot of time talking to your mom now. And
the kids were outside weeding the garden with Grandma a little bit ago.
and playing with radio controlled cars. Usually they're hanging out with Grandma because Grandma had the day off, and so they helped her with
Grandma's
the
the
pool.
one who bought the corn. That's why I didn't know how much there was.
Yes, corn. They worked on the pool together. The kids are out there.
She did Bible with us this
She did
morning.
Bible this morning. She does prayer time with us when she's available, multiple nights a week usually. So it's a great relationship that probably wouldn't be what it is because we wouldn't be living here. Because if your dad and your mom were still living here, we wouldn't all be living in this house together.
Right.
So here we are. And you know, God works in spite of all of those things, or through all of these things. It's not like any of it surprised him either.
So God provided us a house that we didn't know we were going to have. God provided us corn dogs at times that we didn't know we were going to get.
Oh, and that big thing of roast beef. Remember that like whole big deli? It was like 25 pounds
God
of
has
roast
provided clothes for us at times that we didn't. Like one time the girls had just told me the day before that they needed shirts. Like they needed shirts. And we had a random person who was coming towards our town and happened to write to us the next day and say, "Hey, do you girls need any shirts?" So we just went through our closets and we have shirts. We hadn't asked anybody. We hadn't said anything.
And it was like a dozen shirts
Yeah. So it's...
that the girls loved. They were like things that they wanted.
They still wear them.
Still wear
That was years ago. Virginia had, like, I know
She had
both
one
of
of
them
the
have.
videos, yeah. Yep.
So it's something that God has provided in a lot of ways that weren't what you would typically think of. Okay, God gave us a job which provided money, which meant we went out and bought the things we wanted. but he's always provided. And I have a friend who has a large family, and she has said that every time that they've gotten pregnant without telling anyone, her husband has gotten a raise every time.
Every time.
That's not
And they've got a bunch of kids.
They do have a bunch of kids, and they've been able to do a lot of things because of that. So God has provided a lot for them, and they're trying to raise their kids to the glory of God. So they're working hard to do that. So that was just trying to be the encouragement today. Don't be anxious about anything, including how many children God is going to give you, because all of them are a blessing. Right? Are you a blessing?
You are.
Are you ready to say bye-bye? If you liked this video, please like or subscribe or share any of those things. Leaving a comment, it just helps with the algorithm of more people being able to see these videos.
And we get to know people. So like, if you share comments, we have, people that comment, oh, I'm from the UK, I'm from Australia, I'm from Finland, I'm from Norway. And we've gotten to know things about their family, and we can pray for them. And I know some of them have said that they prayed for us. And so we're also, like, we have our local community and our local church, but we also have the opportunity to reach out to you guys. So your comments are actually, sometimes you guys start talking to each other, and that's even better, you know.
We've also had a lot of people recently who have joined, have started watching our videos and stuff. And we've been able to make videos specifically to help people. That's the reason we have our channel, is because we want to be able to encourage parents trying to raise their kids for the glory of God. And so we want people to be able to see what we're doing so that we can share with more people to hopefully be a blessing, because we want people to just have resources. And sometimes those resources are sharing you guys sharing ideas with each other.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Anyway, we will see you guys next time on Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. I forgot what I was saying. Bye.
We need a nap.